Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you this morning. When Richard asked me to come and give you a presentation, he challenged me to give a non-traditional science talk, which certainly made me feel a bit nervous. So I'm going to have a crack at that. I've risen to that challenge, and I want to, I guess, challenge you as well to have a really good think about what I'm going to present today, and ask yourselves some of those challenging questions about what you might do about it. Which button is it? Sorry. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is paint a picture of what Aotearoa might look like in 30 years' time, 2053. And rather than delve into the uncertainties of different future pathways, I'm going to give you a picture of New Zealand if, I guess, things haven't panned out quite the way that we hope with international decarbonisation and negotiations. So this is very much a top-end or high-end emissions scenario, and something that I think we all need to take into account, that it is a very possible future. So we may have, imagine this then, and take a deep breath, double the number of major floods per year compared with today. Our annual repair costs for damage to buildings, homes, and property is doubled. Annual repair costs for damage to roads and infrastructure is doubled. Our global sea level is another 30 centimetres higher than it is today. And this manifests in extreme coastal inundation events that we would consider today to be a 1 in 100 year event occurring annually. Vulnerable roads are frequently damaged and cause major disruptions to travel times and access. Our present day 1 in 100 year intense short duration rainfall event is now occurring on a decadal scale. There are hundreds of major landslips per year, particularly in the wet season and winter. And as a result, there are hundreds of homes and buildings per year that are red stickered. Hail and thunderstorm damage costs are doubled. We have multi-region drought occurring every year. And some of those droughts are persisting for 6 to 9 months, and even some going all the way through winter. Our lake and our river levels are consistently low throughout summer. The snow line is 300 metres higher. Our glaciers continue to rapidly retreat. This is a picture in 2007. That's the same picture in 2021. The wildfire season is all year. We're having heat waves, including marine heat waves, every summer. And our ocean is now more acidic, warmer, and has a decrease in its nutrients. Now this is one of the key take-homes that I want you to focus on. We're now in a continuous state of emergency response and recovery. We're no longer in a paradigm where we have an event that is an emergency that we need to recover from, and then it's back to something that we would consider normal. In fact, we're no longer in a paradigm where we have one event and then another event and then another event, and it seems like we're never able to catch up. We're now in a state where we're having multiple events happening all the time, continuously. The impacts are multiple and compounding. Vulnerable infrastructure and buildings are damaged and destroyed, especially from flooding. Towns and rural communities are frequently cut off and isolated for weeks at a time. Indigenous biodiversity is under attack from pests and invasive species. And natural habitats are degraded, especially in the coasts and wetlands. We've got extreme heat days that are impacting on human and animal health and leading to high energy use. Our marine ecosystems and fisheries and aquaculture are impacted by warming and acidification. Our forests and grasslands are at constant risk of wildfire, and droughts are affecting agricultural productivity and water security. And all of this is happening all the time. Of course, it's not just happening here in New Zealand. This is a global problem. And so what does the world look like in 2053? Agreements to reduce global emissions are ineffective. The mean global temperature is now 2.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels, noting we're already 1 degree through that range. CO2 emissions are at 80 gigatons per year, and atmospheric CO2 concentration is at 512 parts per million, so another 100 parts per million above what we currently are at. Now, when the IPCC released their latest assessment report, the UN Secretary General called it Code Red for Humanity. I wonder if any of us have sort of taken the time to think what that actually means for us. And of course, we don't know if this is going to be the future that we follow. And so the way that climate change works, or climate change science works, is that we base our projections on scenarios of the future. And I know a lot of you are already in the business of developing scenarios and considering what they might mean. This is just one, what I've presented to you today is one of those scenarios. In fact, everything that I've presented there in terms of those impacts is consistent with that SSP3 regional rivalry scenario. And the picture on the right is the change in temperature, the pathway for temperature just for that scenario. It's not even the worst one. The SSP5 is leading to higher projections of temperature. And of course, the end point in that picture is 2100. So the picture I've presented to you is just for 2053. We've got to consider that if we're on that pathway, it doesn't stop them. In fact, it carries on and it gets worse. If you dissect this shared socioeconomic pathway, SSP3, from the literature, these are some of the things that pop out. Population growth, this is global now. Population growth is high in developing countries. Environmental degradation occurs across some regions. There's a focus on domestic issues. Investments in education and technological development decline. Economic development is slow. Policies are oriented towards regional security. Inequalities persist or worsen over time. And food security, energy and food security are prioritized at the expense of broader-based development. Now, none of that sounds particularly nice, but it is a realistic picture of what the future might be. So, given what I've presented to you today, and thinking about what this might mean for you, and for your clients, and for New Zealand, and for the world, I guess I've been challenged to present this talk in a different way. Now I'm challenging you to ask the question, how are you preparing for this? Ngā mihi nui kia koutou.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I've got a few questions for you, all right? We talked a little bit before, and I was asking you, do you still have hope? Or what gives you hope for the future? What can we do as an industry or individuals to make sure that this doesn't happen, or this doesn't happen to that extent at least?
Yeah, and my response previously was that if I look back over my career at NIWA, which is now nearly 25 years, I see a lot of progress. I see a massive amount of change globally and in New Zealand in terms of policy development and businesses taking sustainability more seriously, changes in regulatory environment. The topic of climate change adaptation getting onto the table alongside climate change mitigation, reducing emissions. So if I look at it from that sort of back trajectory, then I do see a lot of progress, and that gives me hope that we are taking this seriously and we are on the right track. What worries me a little bit still is that things are still progressing quite slowly to reduce our emissions, and so that type of world is no longer far-fetched. It's actually a distinct reality, and I don't think that we are ready for it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We're not ready for it. So definitely, what would be your first priority for us to work on to stop this?
Well, I like what's happening at the moment across New Zealand, across the world, in terms of the scenario development work that's happening across sectors. I've seen it for tourism, for agriculture, for fisheries, for other sectors as well. So building up these scenarios of what the future might look like, and the information that I presented today is actually completely aligned with the hothouse type scenario that many of you will be already considering. So that's really positive, because it starts, it enables that mindset of thinking, okay, well, this is actually a possible future. How will my business survive in that future? Will it still be delivering the services that are expected of it? How are my customers going to react to this? Is my supply chain going to be affected by it, etc.? So it enables that thinking, and then one would hope that through risk assessment and adaptation planning, then we're able to at least deal with these consequences.
And do you think, we talked a lot for the last day or so about also financial literacy, and starting with the young also, to make sure they understand what's ahead of them. Do you think the way our children are confronted to this is the way it should be? I know personally I've got an 11-year-old, and she got a lot of anxiety with what's happening in the world. Do we need to have a bit more environmental literacy, if I could call that this way?
I've got kids as well. They're in their 20s, and they certainly have, all of their life have been exposed to these types of climate change messages. And so I actually think that level of literacy is very high in the younger generations. It does lead to anxiety, though, and so in terms of an education system that is exposing kids to these types of possible futures, the care needs to be taken there to present that in a way that is not implying that it's okay, it's all going to be onto you. The burden will be transferred onto this next generation, and you must deal with it. That can and does create mental health issues and certainly raise anxiety. And it's beholden on to us, our generation, not to transfer that burden onto them.
Thank you very much for this. So if I can just recap, that's pretty scary. I think we all agree with that. We still have a little window to do something about it, and I guess the government in New Zealand also with the TCFD reporting, the XRB, etc., is really trying to kickstart that. But beyond that, I think it's up to all of us to really make sure we build that into our DNA and we really embodied that, right?
Yeah, for a long time the discussion has been about reducing emissions. But I think what's been missing from that discussion is why we're reducing emissions. And it's clear from this presentation, from the evidence that's already being seen, that the reason why we're reducing emissions is to avoid that future. And that's the most important thing that we can give to our next generation, is that we put the effort in now to avoid that future. Yeah. And it's a global effort, and that does include New Zealand.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tait. It was eye-opening, not eye-opening, we know what's happening, but yeah, very scary. But thank you very much for your time this morning.
You're welcome.